starting to water. Goods. Need the goods. Man, I got really good at starting a fire, didn't I? Oh, he's in like Flint, son.
This is a very special episode.
Yes, sir.
We only get to do a couple of these every year.
Yeah, no, I'd imagine. We can probably do this a couple times this year, I would think, though. Hopefully. God willing.
We can hope. Yeah, there's no guarantees, right?
That's right.
Tomorrow's never guaranteed.
That's right.
Yeah, this is a special episode because we're going to do something that's really important. We're going to debunk, do mule deer, sage and mule deer taste like sage.
About to find out.
I'm excited about that.
This could be terrible.
I'm really excited about that. And then we get to deep dive on my hunt.
Nice.
Which is cool.
Looking forward to it. Ready to pop that top?
Yeah, let's pop.
You're over there.
What's your prediction? Do sage and mule deer taste like sage?
Well, God, you'd sure think they would because they eat sage all the time. But I'm going to say no. I think you already know, though, because you've eaten some of this.
I've already sampled the good, so I'm not, this is important that, we get a good opinion out of you.
Yeah, I'm guessing no, but we're going to find out.
You ready to slice and dice?
I'm ready, dude. Let's
dice it up.
My stomach's growling.
Okay, so Josh is our grill master.
Could be good, could be bad. Sometimes she good, sometimes she shit.
One of very few I would trust with my meat, but I know he knows how to grill.
I got a little bit of practice in me.
Because I think that's how you eat most of your meals, isn't it?
I do use a Blackstone or a Traeger for almost everything I eat.
I mean, even Joe Rogan would be proud of this. Look at this.
Well, I'd like to think it'd be all right.
Crusted up.
Let's see.
This is
yeah. That's about my level of rare with game. That's perfect.
Nice. That looks good. This is, I think even Joe Rogan would be proud of this right here. Mm-hmm. Look at this. Now, for somebody that doesn't know where backstrap comes from, tell them about that.
Well, it's the piece of meat along the spine, down the back, on either side of the bone. It's a long loin, basically.
And if you were to buy it in a store, what's it labeled as?
I've never bought it in a store. I don't know.
Tenderloin.
No, tenderloin's
or not
inside.
tenderloin.
Tenderloin's down inside.
No, that's what they call backstrap too. Backstrap's tenderloin in the store. Beef tenderloin.
I don't know about that.
Or name the beef steaks. It's the circular cut you would order in a restaurant.
I don't taste any sage, but maybe I'm wrong. I've never eaten a piece of sage, so I don't know what it tastes like.
Hey, give it a few, man.
It's good. Let's see here. I'm trying to think of my cuts. I feel like an idiot. It's been a very long, busy season, and my brain's fried. That's really good. You should get your phone out and check what it's technically called.
This is really good.
Maybe it's just called the loin as opposed to the tenderloin. So I know the tenderloins are on the inside of the leg, on the underside of the spine.
But I think when you buy it from the grocery store, they also label backstrap as tenderloin. I know if we were processing a deer or anything, we would call backstrap, and the underside, there's like there's an underside of the backstrap on the inside of the cavity that's significantly smaller that we would call tenderloin.
That's tenderloin.
Yeah. But I think when you're buying it in the stores, I think it's labeled as tenderloin.
I think it's just labeled as loin, if I had to guess. But if this tastes like sage, apparently I really like the taste of sage. I'm saying no.
It don't taste like sage, bro.
It tastes like milk-fed beef.
Tastes like... I think it tastes like deer. I mean, I've never tasted a deer that I thought was, significantly swung one direction from any deer. Mm-hmm. This is good, though. I don't know. Yeah. It's pretty fresh, too.
Yeah. It's really good. Did this ever get frozen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got froze. Froze maybe a couple weeks. Pulled it out last night. Nice. I've been eating pretty good. We did maybe a quarter of my available burger meat into burger with Drew. Mm-hmm. And Drew's been on the podcast before. Drew had beef from his family farm that was like, grass fed, no hormones, no bullshit. Mm-hmm. And we cut my burger with 20% of that fat, and I think that's what made it. We did a double grind, and it's fantastic, dude.
Yeah, you got to add beef fat to it. Got to add some kind of fat to it. I have had.
Yeah, a lot of people do pork fat.
I've had bacon ends done.
That's good.
That's really good.
We did that.
Like I got really confused at first. I was like, this kind of tastes like breakfast food. Mm-hmm. But it's super good.
What I try to do though is because, Wild Game doesn't have any of the bullshit. I've always tried to cut it with stuff that doesn't have any of the bullshit, just to keep it clean. And it's hard to find really good clean fat from, commercial. Mm-hmm. You got to know a guy or whatever.
Yeah, very challenging. That's really good.
But we did a double grind. What'd you season this with?
Montreal steak seasoning. It's what I put on most red meat. Mm-hmm. Which is really good.
Classic.
It's very good. I want to say, well, Jason Prince first turned me on to that when I was 21. We used it ever since. Super tasty. Did I cook it to your level of liking there?
Chef Josh. Yeah, you did a good job, man. I told you, I trust you. I know you know your way around the grill. That's money. I'd honestly say that's perfect. Perfectly done.
Mm. No sagebrush to me.
Verdict's in, guys. This was a freaking sage buck.
So tell me a story. Since you still really haven't told me the story, even though it's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, do you want to do the long? This is a podcast, so we can do the long version.
Long form discussion, buddy.
Long form, baby. We might just even draw it out a little bit.
Whatever you want to do, buddy.
Okay, verdict on the meat. No sage. That's where I'm at.
I would say none. That's one of the tastiest pieces of meat I've ever eaten.
That was awesome.
It's hard to say it. I would think sage would taste terrible.
Yeah.
So no, didn't taste like sage to me.
Okay. So start of this hunt, Nevada mule deer. I drew it in the spring, and basically this is an important lesson. The way the Nevada draw system works is you get 5 choices. And I've always read that you should take your 5th choice seriously because there's some chance you draw it. But Nevada's already hard to draw a tag anyway. So I didn't take my 5th choice very seriously.
Whoops.
Yeah. But here's kind of my rationale. I was like, I'm just going to pick a spot on a map because there's no bad tags in Nevada. So
yeah, right.
Here's my spot on the map, whatever. Or I just clicked it off the click-in menu. And I looked at the success rates. And a few years back, the success rates in this unit were pretty good, although there's not a lot of tags. So I set my strategy a few years back, and I never changed it. Anyway, long story short, sure enough, I drew my 5th choice and kind of debated on whether I could do the hunt or not because it's a pretty long drive, and I just was a little uncertain of how this year was going to shake out. Quite a bit of change. But I was like, okay, I'm going to do the hunt. It's an early season hunt. Let's send it. And here we go. So Nevada's like an August 10th or 11th opener this year.
Okay.
And we went down, me and Lucas, a local guy who said he wanted to come hang out for the trip and help hunt, help me camera stuff, and be a really good hunting partner. And Luke, shout out to Lucas. Lucas was a really good hunting partner. Lucas Palmer. He did he was awesome. He helped me out, helped me glassing, was handy around camp and handy with the cameras, like everything I could ask for. So Lucas and I sent it. We're going to get down there 2 days early to scout and cover ground and just take inventory. Mm-hmm. And it's exciting going into a new unit. You don't know what you're going to find. You don't know what's around the next corner. And I kind of look at my job as being like, we got to cover the macro. We got to see the big picture. We got to see what's around, hit big vantage points, and then narrow into the micro. So that's what we did. We spent 2 days scouting, and in those 2 days, we saw 2 deer, 3 deer. So we went into opening day not having even a buck to hunt.
That's not good. What was the what had the weather been like? Was it abnormally different or just consistent?
No, it was warm during the day, 85, 90, and then 50, 55 at night, depending how high your elevation was. So that's pretty traditional for what's that area is,
Okay.
early season or whatever. So we spent those days scouting and just ground our dicks into the sand, looking all over from every vantage point we could find, and just didn't see deer. We also didn't see hunters, so that was cool, but we didn't see deer. And okay, so let's go opening day. Opening day comes around. We're in this spot. We're going to go run to the backside of the mountain. We didn't see anything on the front side of this mountain, but we're going to go check the backside in the morning. Wake up, flat tire. And so opening morning, flat tire, sick. I do have a compressor, so I put my compressor on, put some air in it, and we can hear the air coming out of the tire.
Ooh, that's not good.
Yeah, so I knew it wasn't going to hold air. It was fucked, basically. And we went to the nearest town, 60 miles away or whatever, of course. And it did hold air on that drive, so that was cool. And we show up to this town. We're like there an hour before they open. Roll into the Napa. The Napa gal's like, hey, there's 2 people that do tire changes in this town. One of them's across the street. He's unlicensed. It just looked like Bob's redneck shop.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, and he just kind of works as he chooses. And then there's a tow shop that does stuff too. So I walk into the tow shop, and it's like something out of a movie theater. I walk in, and this gal didn't even look at me. Didn't even address I was there, and she's like, what do you want? And I was like, I got a flat tire. I need to get it fixed. Can you guys get it in? And she's like, yeah, the guys are doing one right now. You'll be next up in line. So I get it in. The guys look at my tire, and they're basically like, hey, your tire is fucked. It's in the sidewall. But what you could do is you can go down to Napa. You can get a plug kit, and you can plug it yourself. We'll show you how to do it. And I was like, well, and they're like, we can't do it. It's a liability thing or whatever.
Yeah, they won't typically touch a sidewall.
They won't do it.
Yep.
So I was like, well, I could figure it out, but, I'd prefer if you guys would do it or whatever. I can give you cash or whatever. Yeah. And they both kind of looked at each other and like, yeah, but no paperwork. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I went down to Napa, got a plug kit, came back to them. These guys will never see this podcast, but I really felt like they helped me out a lot in a situation where those roads were shit, dude. And I don't want to be running on my spare.
Probably not a good idea.
Because my spare is shit,
Right.
And we're just going to bang it around all week long. This is the beginning of our hunt. So those guys plugged the tire plug held. And on our way back with Lucas, I was just kind of brainstorming, like, what are we going to do? We're hosed. Well, let's go back to where we saw 2 does. We saw some deer, and we'll just go dive deeper. And we went back to where we saw those does and kind of like crested over into the next basin and saw a patch of deer. And that patch of deer had horns. So that was a bachelor group.
Gotcha.
There was 5 or 6, maybe 4 or 5 bucks in that bachelor group. There's a big 3x3, medium 3x3, a smaller 3x3, and a smaller 2x2 or something like that. And we had bucks to hunt, so that was cool.
Nice.
We were at this was like a true high country setting. I mean, all over this unit, you could have been in the low country or the high country, but we found them in the freaking high country. We were up at like 10,000 feet and more.
Before you run off from the tire thing, I want to tell you a little trick that I used to, or why I run winter tires. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I run the same size wheel and tire winter and summer. Mm-hmm. My winter tire is always some kind of a mud terrain that takes a stud.
Yep.
And my winter tires are my spare tire. So it's the same quality of type of tire. It's the same reliability of tire, but you can swap it if you ever run into a problem. So I don't have a spare tire. I have a winter tire, and in the winter, I have a summer tire in my truck and swap it out. So
that's a good program.
Same load, same ply, same quality. So your spare isn't a shit tire. So you've got a good extra tire.
Yeah.
And then your tires last longer because you're running your winter tires in the winter, summer tires in the summer. Don't have to change them out as often. Sorry. Just want to touch
and
on
if you're
that.
going back to Nevada, like I would have a tire plug kit and I would have a good spare tire or two if you're taking a trailer. Because there's not soil, dude. It's rocks. And you're just chattering on rocks everywhere you go. Just, you know, like you feel like you're going to lose your cavities out of your teeth kind of thing. Chattering
sounds
everywhere you go.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's bad. You know, big old General might be cool down there, something like that. AC or whatever you got.
That would be the Expedition.
Expedition, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, those would be cool. And,
They are very cool.
yeah. So, yeah, we found some bucks to hunt. And it was exciting. You know, it was like a breath of fresh air. But at this point, we were four days in, I think. And this was our first bachelor group of bucks. And at this point, in total, maybe I've seen 10 or 12 deer. So I was still concerned because when you're mule deer hunting, you don't really want to stalk a deer and hope not to blow it out because you're not going to see, you don't have another buck to chase, you know?
Sure.
Like my hope for Nevada would have been to go down there 2 days early, have deer inventory to be like, okay, there's a bachelor group here. Oh, here's the biggest buck, maybe the most approachable buck or whatever, and had options. We didn't have options. We had one bachelor group, and we did kind of disperse out through this area and kind of cover this greater area, and it was just one pocket of deer. And we got to watching these deer. Didn't make a play on them right away. We just kind of held back and watched them. And the first night, I could have made a play on them, like we had a storm roll in.
Gotcha.
So I was like, I'm not going to chase these bucks out of here with the weather being shit.
Sure.
We'll come back in the morning. Came back the next morning. Those bucks were there, same vein, right where they had been. And we got to kind of watch what they did that day. They fed to a set of trees, hunkered down there all day, fed a little bit through the day, and then they fed back to this vein. All day that day, Lucas and I basically tucked into nothing. We made a little rock shelter on a rock face, and it was like trying to hide from the sun all day. You ever been in the sun at 10,000 feet?
Yes, I have. It's brutal.
It's way more extreme, dude.
Oh yeah, like it's not what you think. It's very taxing. It's very brutal. I've been in the sun at 10,000 feet a couple different times, and you get done with your day and you're like, why am I so exhausted? It's like, well, you're dealing with an environment that your body's not used to.
Yeah, there's less to filter the air or whatever, so the UV rays are much stronger.
Yeah.
And yeah, so on that thread, a couple gear MVPs. These are two things that, and the first one you're going to laugh at, but the first one was chapstick.
I agree. Chapstick would have been very valuable on my hunt.
Dude, you got to have chapstick on a backcountry hunt.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to, because when your lips chap, there ain't no coming back, dude.
Yeah.
So chapstick, and then I wore, all week long, I wore a merino long sleeve from Stone Glacier with the hood. It was like ninja style hood. I should have worn it today, but when you go full ninja, it's like that. So you got maximum coverage. And merino doesn't stink.
No, it does not.
You know that? Yeah.
Merino does not inhibit or carry odor. That's why merino socks are really popular.
Yeah.
It's because your feet don't stink.
Yeah.
Because all the other materials, bacteria can fester in there because odor is bacteria.
Yeah.
So that's why you can get away with wearing the same thing every day. Like I want to say Sitka, when they first started, was using like silver thread technology, and it was the same stuff you'd used to get in a battle dressing in like World War I. Bacteria can't survive in it, so you can get away with it being not super clean because the bacteria won't grow. So that was originally theirs. But yeah, merino is the original unstinky fabric because it just won't inhibit odor. It won't hold it.
And it insulates when wet.
Yeah, merino is an incredible
wool,
material.
Wool in general insulates when wet.
The only negative is typically per its temperature, it's heavy in comparison to some of the other things you can
And
wear.
what I found with all these merino garments is I haven't found one that after heavy use doesn't eventually wear thin. Like your socks will wear thin, or anything for like an extended period of time, they just wear thin.
It's not durable.
Yeah.
Like if you had an infinite budget and you could just like throw one away once a week, merino would be the best thing that you could possibly wear all the time. And the other cool thing about like merino pants and wool pants is they sound like animals walking It's only the only fibers that when they brush together,
It's a good point.
it sounds like animals
It's very
walking.
quiet,
Where
too.
almost every other thing you wear has some kind of fake synthetic sound when it brushes. Even cotton, like cotton brushing together, doesn't sound right.
No.
But when you run wool across itself, it sounds like animal legs walking.
When I first got turned on to merino, I was wearing First Light merino,
Yep.
and it was fine. I think First Light makes some fine stuff, but their warranty is a pain in the ass for like.
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with that?
Not personally. I've heard it on multiple occasions. I religiously wore their Canab 2.0 pant, and I think they call it an Obsidian now, if I remember right. And I don't know if they've changed it from that because when they went
I wore the Obsidian a little bit.
to direct to consumer, I stopped using them. But that was the quietest pant I've ever worn in my life. Love that pant. It's just if you breathe on it funny, you'll get a hole in it. If you snag it on a tiny little branch, it'll rip. And they had that like 4-way ripstop grid in it, but you'd still rip holes in it. And if you didn't mind holes being in your pants, they were a great pant. Like it for a bow hunter in September, it's really hard to beat because it's hard to find products that are authentically quiet. And merino wool is stupid quiet. Merino products are awesome. And I think that I think First Light was struggling with the amount of wool they could simply get. So they kind of veered away from those products a lot. And as their line expanded when they went from dealer to consumer direct, and they tried to expand and grow, they took a lot of the wool products out, and the wool products that they kept, they did a lot of blends. They like went wool with poly, or like there's part wool, part poly in a lot of different things. And I really think that was a direct reflection of they had a single source for their wool, and they were consuming all of it. Like they got this New Zealand wool from this one place, and that's all they used and all they would use, and they would consume literally every bit of wool that they could get. So I think that's part of why they went away from it, and why you don't see a greater variety of merino wool products. Like it's still to this day the only merino wool pant in a hunting garment that I've seen. There's a Japanese company that makes a merino wool pant that's thin, but every other wool pant I've seen is heavy and thick, where the merino ones weren't. They were pretty thin.
And for the longest time, Sitka had a very little to no merino stuff, and it just didn't make any sense to me because Sitka's like so backcountry forward. Maybe they couldn't source any wool, but this year they launched some merino products.
I think they've had merino for like 3 years now.
Yeah.
But I
know this year they expanded on it.
They expanded on it, which is great. But I think part of that is durability issues too, with trying to guarantee a product. Because it's just not durable. Like I for a while there, I wore First Light's merino boxers. It was all I would wear. The greatest thing in the world, and then the crotches would rip out of them after like a month or two of use.
I've been there. I blew them
And
out
they're
myself.
$50.
Yeah.
I got to get more than 2 months out of a pair of freaking underwear. And that's not like wearing the same underwear every day. That's having 7, 8, 9 pairs of them and changing them every day and washing them at the end of the week and hang drying them and, treating the product the way it's supposed to be treated. But yeah, they'd blow out like constantly.
Anyway, their warranty is a pain in the ass, and they'll warranty stuff, but they make you jump through a few hoops. You got to fill out a form. The form's got to get approved. You got to send it back. Then they got to send it back to you. Where most high-end products also come with high-end warranties, and I don't know. Maybe it's changed since this was a couple years back, but it was
tough.
tough.
I see it, if you're complaining about a product and you spent like $250 on a pair of pants and there's something wrong with it, they should probably replace it.
Yeah,
for at least a couple of years.
and they will. It's just not like a no questions asked.
it
thing.
should
It's
be
like,
it should be a what do you got? What's wrong? How long you had it? When'd you buy it?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go. And have it be like a 2-year or 3-year guarantee or something at least.
But
I
anyway,
think anybody spend that kind of money should.
gear MVPs. That merino hoodie, I wore it all week long. Never changed out of it. Kept me out of the sun. And chapstick. And then I have
What type of chapstick was it?
I don't know. It's like
Burt's
got some
Bees or
beeswax.
what?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, Burt's Bees, baby.
Yeah.
That's
something like that.
That's the chapstick right there.
And I got a little backcountry tent that I think it's from Tarp Tents. I think there's other ones that are cool or similar, but I think a lot of hunters buy their tents from hunting companies, and I think the hunters should look into backpacking companies because they're the ones that get more reps in the field. Than
for
the
sure.
hunters, like
for sure.
some of those crazy ass backpackers that do like the the north-south trails in the U.S., like the CDT or the PCT or the Appalachian Trail. Like those guys get a shitload of time in the field. So
Yeah, they
I think
definitely have more experience than any of the hunting companies are ever going to have about staying in a tent because they're doing crazy amounts of stuff in tents. Yeah, no, I agree. That's a good bit of information to think about.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I got the little tarp tent. It's pretty cool. It's handy. It's been good to me. Those are. I thought about that on the drive back. That's why I wanted to mention it. But okay, we got bucks now, and we got kind of a program on them. So, and we're running out of time. I think we were 8 days into a 10-day hunt or something like that at this point. Whatever, farting around we did in the mountains. Here we are at day 8 out of day 10. So I told Lucas, I'm like, dude, I'm going to be aggressive. I got to be aggressive tomorrow. And we crawl up the knob to get to where we hopefully see these bucks. We're almost cresting the top of the knob. And I don't know if you ever have this happen to you in the backcountry, but I looked at Lucas and I just had like brain fog in the morning, and I had set my bow down and to glass or something. And I looked at him and I was like, I don't have my bow. And he looked at me and he's like, you don't have your bow. And I was like, I got to go back down. So I'm thinking, oh shit. Well, I better at least double check around before I bomb off this hill. And I looked and it was certain. I just leaned it on a bush. But we just both had like morning brain fog,
No, I've never just left my bow somewhere and not realized I didn't have it.
Anyway, yeah.
Oh man.
So
I did grab the wrong arrows for my setup once when I was loading the truck and got all the way to where I was going, pulled it out, and they were not only were they the wrong arrows, they were too short. You couldn't use it no matter what you did. There was no way to fix it. Did that once.
Yeah.
In my, I think it was my early 20s. I did that once.
But anyway, this was just morning brain fog, and my bow was there. Cool. We crest the hill. Bucks are there. They're in that vein that we hoped they would be. And I told Lucas, okay, I'm going to go make a move, working up this saddle, and they go to bed. So this is 7 in the morning or something like that. And now we got to wait until they come out in the evening or they feed back out. So fortunately for me, I'm up near the tree line. I can tuck her into some trees. But Lucas is back on that bald ass face, dude. And he's there from 8 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. And in my video, which should be live by now, my YouTube video will be live. You get to see Lucas's little hobo shelter of rocks and, tarps. And he was just trying to hide from the sun. But yeah, that's why I said Lucas really crushed it, because we weren't going to hike back down to camp. It was like 1,000 vertical feet to where we were. So we had to stay where we were for the day, and deer feed out in the evening. I make a play. I go up and around, which, I don't know, a couple 100 feet more up, half a mile around, drop down. I'm coming down and I see antlers, and I expected to see these deer much further down, and I just see antler tips, and I hung tight, and those antler tips moved around, got up. I was going to range this deer and shoot it. It was like the mid-size 3x3 that I didn't know was bedded there. So he stood up on me, and I had him at 40 yards, but he bounced off. And I was like, oh shit, this deer's bouncing off, so he's going to blow these other deer out.
Right.
This is over. But I just kept sneaking forward and got to where these deer should have been, and I got there like 5 minutes too late. These deer just started feeding out of my range, the big 3x3 and the smaller 3x3 he was with. And it was really windy, and that big 3x3 was at 80 yards. And I did something that was kind of cool that I had learned actually from listening to Cameron Haynes tell a hunting story. I heard him say one time that he drew back on an animal to see how it felt. I always felt like when you draw back, like it's time to shoot.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that you can draw back just to see how your float is. So that's what I did. I drew back, and my float was fucking all over the place, dude. It's 20-mile-an-hour winds. I had to lean my bow so far into the hill to get my bubble level that it probably took me 10 seconds, and I kept leaning, and I'm like, maybe I'm going the wrong way because it's not leveled out yet.
What's going on with this thing?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I just kept leaning, and it finally leveled out, and then I watched my pin float around, and it wasn't even holding on his body. So I basically had to retreat out, and that was an 80, 85 yard shot. So for me to take that shot, things would have needed to be just right, you know?
Sure.
But I was kind of willing to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we retreat out, come back the next day. It's on like Donkey Kong. We kind of know their program and run the same program again. So up the hill to the glassing knob. There they are in that same vein. I'm going to make a move on them. I run up to make the move, and they head to bed early. I don't know why that day, but they did. I couldn't get to them. So we ran the same program again. And I hung out up in the trees all day. Lucas hung out in the rocks all day. And those bucks started feeding out in the evening. And I knew where they were going, so I beelined it to where I thought they were going to come out. And it was kind of playing an interception or an ambush game.
Mm-hmm.
And these bucks, I'm looking to my left. I expected them to come out just below me, feed at a lateral line to me. And they came out above me, which was okay. You know, they were within range. So they fed over this knob. And at this point, I got the big 3x3, which is like a big, healthy 3x3, saggy belly, all the things. Mm-hmm. And that was the biggest buck in the basin. I had him at 60 yards, head behind a bush. And I had the smaller 3x3 at 50 yards. And the smaller 3x3 was comfortably feeding, and so was the bigger 3x3. So what I expected was the bigger 3x3 was going to follow that one's footsteps. And he was actually slightly below that one in elevation. The bigger one was slightly below the smaller one in elevation.
I got you.
So I expected him to come to 40 yards, and I was going to smoke him. And he just picked his head up like old deer do, looked downhill because I was below him, and saw something he didn't like. Me, you know. And he didn't spook out. He just walked away, turned his head, walked away.
Why wouldn't he like you, Timmy?
Yeah, exactly.
You're such a likable guy.
Turned his head, walked away. And when he did that, the smaller 3x3 was going to follow suit. That's his boy, right?
Yeah.
So I immediately ranged the smaller 3x3, ranged him at 50, dialed to 48 because our elevation was high. I had this pretty cool shot. It was uphill, like 20 degrees. And drew back on that smaller 3x3, and I made a pretty good shot.
Nice.
I didn't see the arrow impact, although I thought I saw it impact, and I thought I could see a red spot on his side when he ran away. When I get to reconvene with Lucas, he said, it looked like you hit that deer, and I only saw the 3x3, the big 3x3 on his own.
Gotcha.
So at that point, I thought I killed him.
Sure.
And I started tracking it. And I wasn't going to wait too long to track it because it was open country. And I figured as I got moving, I was going to see him either get out of his bed or I wasn't going to see him get out of his bed.
Sure.
And if we pushed him, he's going to push downhill, and that would have been good for us anyway.
Right.
So I tracked him pretty quick. I maybe gave it 10, 15, 20 minutes. It wasn't that long. And I started to pick up some blood and kind of followed a mediocre blood trail for about 200, 250 yards to where they had bedded.
Mm-hmm.
And I was running out of blood. It just was more sparse. And my early blood was good. It was bright blood. There wasn't a ton of it, but it was bright. It looked good. So I went to this kind of high point where I knew I could glass this vein where if he had ran through this area, he should be in this bottom. Mm-hmm. And when I glassed, I thought I could see his body. And Lucas was on his way over, and he could see his body, and that deer was down. So
cool.
I ended up shooting the smaller of the two bucks on our 8th day there, I think. And all in all, it turned out to be a really rad hunt. High country, beautiful country, but very challenging. And looking back on it, like I wouldn't want to go back to that area. Not on what you expect to be a high quality hunt.
Gotcha.
You know. Like, we definitely would have chased up more deer around here if you and I chased deer for the weekend.
Yeah, that's discouraging.
Yeah.
For, out of state, expensive.
5 points or whatever.
Yeah, preference points consumed. That's a little disappointing.
Yeah.
So what unit was that for the listeners not put in for?
I thought about sharing it. I'm not going to share it.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's Western Nevada. Let's say that.
Sure.
Yeah. And it was just really difficult, dude. And I think upon reflection, I think part of what was going on was a lot of that area pulls in a migratory herd. So for people that are there early, they're not seeing any of those migratory deer. And now people that are there later for maybe muzzle or rifle, I guess rifle gets pretty good. So my understanding was they see a lot more deer. So maybe when they're budgeting for tags, they're getting a different reading on the bead for the amount of deer in there.
Now, do you think if you had used a service like Hunting Fool or something like that, do you think that maybe that would have been information that you would have known and not put in for that if you were going to go early, or maybe it would have encouraged you to maybe hunt later?
Yeah,
on that one?
I think so. And I think Hunting Full Service really specializes in the tag application part of it, allocation. So I think they probably would have suggested something different for my number 5 other than a wild card,
Yeah.
But that's that was where my head was at was, hey, this is it's my fifth choice. I'm very unlikely going to draw it, but if I do draw it, here's this spot on the map that looks interesting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, so for me, because I really haven't done like hardly any exotic hunting. I just haven't. I haven't done all this stuff that people talk about. I've hunted locally and I've tried to stay close to home for the most part because I didn't have flexibility to be able to do that. And I'm finally starting to get to a point that I can, and I don't feel like I have a great education when it comes to those things. So I've really strongly contemplated. I actually asked Jared when he was here. I was like, hey, what does it cost to just have you guys manage me basically when it comes to those things? And I think I'm probably going to do that because I just don't feel like I feel like I'd end up in the situation that you ended up in where I think I drew a really good tag and then find out it's just shit, or I was going at the wrong time or that kind of thing, and having a lack of resources or information to be able to make a good decision in that.
I would highly recommend it for stuff like that, because even if you do want to manage your own hunts, it is so much research, dude. It's so much research to try to figure out the nuances of every state's different application. I joined the Hunting Fool this year because what I wanted was, after I drew, I wanted access to their previous members list.
Yeah, that's a neat feature.
It is, yeah. But in this unit, there was like 4 guys. 2 of them were rifle. 1 of them was muzzleloader. And muzzleloader is like a month behind. So I figured I'd call the muzzleloader guy because he was the most recent. And the muzzleloader guy was like, hey, I ran into 1 buck near town. It was a big buck. He's kind of said densities were low, but he also didn't seem like he put in a ton of effort to find deer. Like he kind of casually hunted.
Sure.
And that wasn't a real red flag to me, because he was like, yeah, I did see a couple good bucks. They were near town. I was like, oh, okay. Well, person gets out and explores a little more. They'll find pockets of bucks or whatever. The cool thing was I didn't see another hunter.
Sure.
So that's a nice experience, to just be out and not be futzing around with other hunters.
Well, how many tags were even available in that unit?
Well, I'm a little concerned about saying that, because then I think a person just might.
Okay, so but is it a tag that you can hunt
handfuls,
archery and muzzle and rifle?
No.
Or is it just an archery tag?
No, when you draw an archery tag, you only get archery.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know. So.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, not to narrow it down, I just didn't know how many people.
Yeah, and I thought about sharing that too, but then I was like, well, if I say that, a person probably knows exactly what unit I was in. And yeah, so very poster card, high country experience, a super difficult hunt. Like, the fact that it came together was, man, I felt like it was a snowball's chance in hell, But we were persistent and, got it done. On the shot too, I mean, to make that shot was kind of a culmination of a lot of shooting for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt good. That was an uphill shot. It was difficult. Had a pack on.
Some of the skills you learned
Some
from
of the wind.
the archery and whatnot from tournament type stuff probably helped.
Just a lot of that. I felt good in that situation. And I felt pretty present up until the point the trigger went off. So, yeah, I don't know. Here's what I know.
Gobbledygook.
I leveled the bubble. My pin float was good. I settled it basically on the heart. and broke it off. That was blackout. Saw what I thought was an entrance, but I wasn't sure.
Joel would be disappointed that you blacked out.
That's a work in progress. It's a whip.
Hey, he self-acknowledges he fails still. And I mean, if the teacher can't do it every time.
So here's what's interesting is when I watched the footage back, that deer actually was in motion when I shot. He was stepping.
Oh.
And I hit probably 3 or 4 inches behind the shoulder, quartering into the shoulder. So I'm thinking if that deer didn't step, I was probably 6 inches more forward, probably in the shoulder, and I think I would have still blew through the shoulder. Kind of where I settled my pin, because I tucked it on his crease pretty tight. But that's why I think if you can, having the footage of your shot is so valuable, even if it's just shitty iPhone footage, because you get to review and see.
Oh yeah, no, I've gone back and looked at when early years when I'd try to record stuff with me and my cousin and whatnot, and when you're in the situation where you can, it's really valuable to go back and see it
in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in a stand or
For
whatever.
sure.
And they make those new magnets. The hunting public guys are promoting them that you can magnet your phone onto the front of your stabilizer.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Cool little product for a person just to get a kill shot type. So, man, I'm a big advocate for if you can have footage, it really does help. Now, in my situation, clean recovery, whatever, went well. But to go back and to just like do the post-game analysis and be like, oh, that deer actually was in motion when that shot broke. So, I don't know, man. It's pretty wild west. And Nevada's pretty wild west for whenever you go there for the first time. It's freaking, there's nothing, dude.
Yeah.
And the towns are small. They're very sparse. They're very sparse.
Yeah.
And the mountain ranges are big. The people were pretty cool that I talked to, for the most part. The Nevada residents I did catch up with were pretty cool. And a lot of what I would say, like the internet community, was very helpful, or as helpful as they could be. No one knew shit about where I was going, which was probably another red flag.
Right.
But a lot of people offered to help. And I thought that's kind of interesting because, in general units, you don't get that kind of help.
Yeah.
But people are willing to help because they might only draw a tag every 5 years or whatever. So the hunting culture in the Southwest is a little different because if you draw a tag, there's not really secrets, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not hunting there.
You're not going there, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of how the concept of the hunting fool was kind of based on so many of those tags. The guy who draws it's never getting it again. So there's no reason for him not to be willing to share information with you that might help you be more successful in that hunt, which is, I always thought it was really interesting. And I learned about that like 20 years ago, well before Jared ever went to work there, because I'd known Jared from a different thing well before then. And I thought, what a great idea. Like, it made a whole heck of a lot of sense. I said, someday when I actually start doing that kind of stuff, I'm going to pay for that service, because that made a lot of sense. So,
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. And if you're a true DIY, you want to do all the research, you want to be in full control, do it. But dude, you're in for so much research, and things are fluid. Things change. Seasons change. Regulations change. A lot of the Southwest is impacted by moisture, and those guys are in tune with that stuff. So, I mean, I think their service, they have a couple different tiers, but it's basically like $100 or $150 a year.
It's not expensive. If you're going to be hunting out of state and you're trying to draw tags, it's very cheap for what it is. Like, it can't hurt. And that's a pretty small investment considering, like, let's take your hunt, for example. How much was your tag?
I think the mule deer tag itself was $250 plus $200 for the hunting tag.
Okay,
so the tag itself was $500-$600.
Okay, so let's say you're $600, and how much does it cost you to put in every year?
In Nevada, it's $200 because you got to buy your hunting license.
Okay, so you spent $1,500 because it took you 5 years to draw it, right?
5 years, yeah.
So you spent $1,500 to draw that tag.
Yep.
What's $150?
Plus all of your effort.
And then that's just drawing the tag.
Yeah.
Right, which the process of that is helping you draw the right tag, right,
Yep.
is the premise. But, I mean, how much you spent to drive, what's your time worth, how much you spent in supplies and things like that to hunt over 10 days.
What a big deal it is to do that kind of thing. Like, 10-day adventure hunt.
Yeah.
I mean, a person, if they're lucky, does, 2 or 3 of those a year.
Right?
So,
like, it's cheap, man.
Yeah.
It's just, it's foolish that there's not more people that do it. But I think that's a lot of either lack of knowledge or lack of preparation, lack of planning, or too much pride, maybe.
Well, and what
I don't need any help. I'll figure it out.
kind
that
of my
thing.
knee-jerk reaction to first hearing about it was like, and I haven't done a consultation with them, so I can't vouch that I've been through that process.
Yeah.
But when my first knee-jerk reaction was like, well, that's cool. They're going to help you get your tags, but could these guys really know the West that well? And I'm like, no, not really. Like, they're probably going to give you some generic spiel that they give everybody.
Right.
Because how are you going to know the West that well? But when I was in Alaska with Jared, talking with him about the nuances of Western hunting, I was like, the dude's a freaking encyclopedia.
Yeah.
I was like, I would so gladly love this kind of help. And Jared's like, yeah, and I'm not even good at this. Like, these guys,
No, he's got some really amazing
the guys under
people.
him are the ones that are good at it.
Yeah.
So at that
Which
point,
he says that, but I disagree. He is really good at it.
I probably is really good at it.
Yeah.
But
he's too modest.
yeah, but just to know that you could have that kind of help, I was like, oh God, that's a no-brainer.
Well, and to throw an example out, when I went and helped Dan on his elk-shaped camp in Eugene, was one of the first ones I'd done in a couple of years. And whenever I can't remember the guy's name that was speaking for Hunting Fool. Jared was supposed to be there, and I was excited because I hadn't seen Jared in a while. And then I found out at the last minute he couldn't go, and he sent one of his guys in his place. And there's 7 or 8 different, subject matter experts that are lecturing, right? Mm-hmm. And all the guys that are there to teach are standing in the back of the room. The Hunting Fool guy comes up, and everybody goes to the front of the room. So the experts are all sitting there listening to him the entire time. It was the only time that everybody went to the front and listened. And I did it too. So, I mean, if that's an indicator to the value of that, the people that are considered professionals are sitting there listening to these guys talk, the tips that they have, the things that they have to suggest. So it's just really valuable, and it's not expensive. If you're going to do this tag allocation, if you're going to do this, I'm going to try to draw in like 7 or 8 states and hope I draw once in a while, that kind of thing, and start spending some real money doing it, you are foolish if you're not paying for that. Like, it's not expensive. It's really not. So.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
It's a shit show. And, even if you dial your plan in one year, who's to say that things don't change the next? Which is kind of what happened to me. I mean, that's what I did as I set my plan 3 or 4 years ago. And I just let it run.
Well, the thing that amazes me is how often the rules change per state. How you apply for tags, what you can do, paying for an extra point, like all these things that exist in there that I do not know and I will not know.
Well, rules, seasons, and trends with game.
Yeah.
Game trends one direction or the other. Like, I know in Idaho specifically, mule deer's been trending down for a while.
Yeah.
But you know what's been trending the opposite of mule deer?
Probably whitetail.
Elk.
Elk
Have actually been on the up for a while in Idaho.
Oh, gotcha.
And I learned that, that was like 1 or 2 years ago. But yeah, everything, I mean, just to be on top of trends and, where people are going. And yeah, I don't know. Unless you want it to be like a full-time job trying to figure that stuff out. Like, because to do it well, you're going to investing tens of hours at a minimum.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's a drastic amount of time. And I don't have that time. I kind of need somebody to do it for me. So I'm definitely, I don't know when the right time of year to start or subscriptions renew.
So let's talk about the shot because people like knowing that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Uphill shot, probably 20 degrees, hit a couple inches behind the shoulder, say 2 or 3, maybe like, 2 or 3 inches from ideal, really. It was very close to being ideal. Angled up, hit maybe a third of the way up, exited 2/3 of the way up. Shot it with the Grim Reaper Micro Hades with my stock arrow setup, which is RIP TKO, 250 spine, your titanium insert on the front, 455 grains, and I just chronoed my bow the other day for a video. It's actually shooting at an even 300 feet per second.
Gotcha.
That's pretty wild, huh?
Yeah, that's a good setup.
29-inch draw.
That's pretty fast for that weight.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
And arrow passed through.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't recover the arrow. Got a good clean pass through, and I shot it with the Grim Reaper Micro Hades. This is the important part I wanted to mention. Grim Reaper Micro Hades flew true, hit true. Love that. Didn't have a ton of blood.
Well, how far did you say you went?
Well, total. So here's the thing. he was doing a death run downhill.
Okay.
So he went lateral probably 200 yards, and then he went downhill probably another 200 yards. So I would say he went 450 yards.
That's a long way for a double long shot.
And
deer.
I didn't open him up to do the autopsy.
Yeah, I wonder that not to
It might have been
dissuade
single,
it. It might have been a single lung.
It could have been single
That
lung.
sounds like a single lung because every double lung deer I've ever shot could not go more than 100 yards, even when it was running straight downhill. So that I bet you it was probably more like a one lung.
Could have been
shot.
single lung. Could have been, maybe just clip the back of the lungs or whatever.
even that antelope that I just shot, that was a double lung shot. I mean, I pulled him open and checked, and he ran 200 yards, but he did it in 8 seconds. Like he covered ground so fast. I've never seen something cover ground that quick.
Yeah, I mean, this could have been similar. But anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
Not a ton of blood, though. So
Well, the reference of that and why I point that out is that if you one lung a deer, there won't be a ton of blood typically. You usually got to get both to get a high amount of capacity of output.
So here's where I'm thinking. Mechanical's got a better chance of catching both lungs.
Oh, I agree. There's a shit ton of benefit to mechanicals. The only thing that I question using mechanical on is elk and bigger. Like anything below an elk, I'm really positive about shooting mechanicals.
Well, where my head was at going into the hunt was if it was a longer shot, I wanted to shoot the microhades because I knew it flew so well, and I wanted penetration. I wanted to make sure it passed through. But I think with the energy it passed
You'd
through.
have passed through regardless.
That's what I think too.
Yeah, the only way you're not passing through is if you hit like the socket of a shoulder or something. You're going through. There's so much energy, and I want to thank Dudley for what he's done in the last month of just arrow after arrow after arrow video after arrow video and experts and podcasts and talking about it and like trying to get away from, hey, momentum's not that important in comparison to energy. And it's what I've personally felt for a really long time is that and for people who've known me since I was even like in my early 20s, I argued that the speed was more important than the momentum. And I think he's had a ton of people on that are way more expert than me to be able to emphasize that they agree with that sentiment for the most part. Like it shouldn't be crazy, but the energy or the KE has a lot more to do with it than the momentum does, was what I took away from a lot of what he did, which I didn't listen to everyone because I don't have that kind of time. But he really went on a
I spammed the internet.
yeah, he did. And he did it like every 3 days. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one.
I think everyone's getting closer to a pretty uniform agreement. And it's largely dependent on what you're hunting, right? And where you're hunting it.
Well, I shot like my first like good mule deer, which I've only killed 1 or 2 good mule deer. I was using a bow that was rated at 308 feet a second, which you're shooting a bow that's rated at 335 or something like that, right? And I was shooting a aluminum ferrule broadhead. I was shooting a 400 grain arrow set up, and I shot that antelope at 80 yards, which that was kind of unheard of back then. Like nobody shot that far. And I sailed right through him and buried in the ground behind him, like a foot in the ground. Like, and that was a bow that was way slower than what we're shooting today. Like there's so much of this stuff that it doesn't make any sense. Like I shot my first black bear with a 40-pound bow and a 22-13 aluminum arrow, and it buried a foot in the ground behind him. Like you're gonna go through. It's just the elk. Like elk have such thick hide that matters. The rest of these things have really thin hide. I mean, you're sailing through kind of no matter what. So I think it's overlooked a lot. So much of these bad penetration issues are tuning issues. They're not so much broadhead issues or so much weight issues. It's poorly tuned bows, poorly tuned configured arrows are your problem, not the type of broad. I mean, the broadhead matters, don't get me wrong.
Well, and just regionally too, there's such a difference between like, your people out east, they're unlikely to shoot past 20, 25 yards. It's unlikely. Yeah. I don't know what the average shot is, but it's got to be 20. Out west, your average shot's probably closer to 40, maybe. Depends. But, the potential for an 80-yard shot for a person who practices a lot is there.
Yeah.
A pronghorn shot in the triple digits for someone who's really confident in their setup. It's there. So, like you said, and you've echoed before, all this stuff matters so much more at distance too.
It does. It does. But if you can still shoot stuff like that doesn't penetrate nearly as good at triple digits and you're still passing through, it's like, at what point do we need to like not care so much? I'm going to tell a brief story about Michael in the shop who ranged an elk wrong. He like hit a branch or something like that and was off by like 8 yards, and he's shooting 520 grains and nicked his back when he shot. And trying to do the math and show him, like, dude, if you shot 400 grains, you'd have probably hit him in the lungs still. Like, it's not, your trajectory has so many advantages, like drastic advantages, as long as what you're shooting isn't like fragile. Like, it's not going to break when you breathe on it kind of thing. There's just so many advantages to lightening that up and shooting faster and flatter. Less reaction time. I mean, there's so many parts of that are huge. Just because you're worried about, passing through a shoulder blade. Like, give me a break.
Yeah. I know the longer we do this, the more I echo all of your early sentiments, which is basically most things that go wrong have to do with time. The animal is dropping or moving.
Taking a step while you shoot. Right?
Yeah. Or the other thing is like, the other side of it that, we take for granted in that statement too is just the time and reps of practice at, uphill, downhill, because that shit gets overlooked a lot.
It's huge. It was so hard 20 years ago when they didn't have angle compensating rangefinders. Like, you had to do the math in your head on the fly of how many yards am I taking off. Like, you pull your rangefinder up and go, okay, 56 yards. And you're shooting an angle like that. And it's like, how many yards do I take off? And your brain's like going, take off like 8, go.
Yeah.
And instead of it just hitting a button and it tells you. Like, there's so much of this. It's so much easier that used to be even way more complicated. And all those things were exacerbated by you shooting slower. All the slower velocity, those yardage angles and everything are greater variance.
Yeah. Yeah. I just watched a YouTube video the last couple nights. Guy was on an elk hunt and got close to this bull he stalked in on, missed the shot. And after the shot was like, I freaking was really uncomfortable because of the angle. I was wearing my pack, all that kind of hunting situation stuff that if a person's kind of maybe newer to Western hunting, God, you might have to make a 20 degree or 20 or even 30 is extreme, but you
Depending
might
on where you are, it's not.
Yeah, you might be
There's
looking
plenty of
straight
places like
uphill
that.
or straight downhill, and that shit is different, dude. It's different when you draw back and your bow's pointed straight up or straight down.
Well, and good angle compensating rangefinders make a really big difference. There's only 2 that I really fully trust. That's the Bushnell Broadhead and the Full Draw 5. Those both work really well when you start getting into steep angles and distance. Like, some of the stuff where you're shooting super steep angles isn't very accurate.
Yeah.
For archery, for the yardage differences. We can't be off by more than a yard or 2. Like, you got to be within a yard or 2 to be proficient for the most part of it.
Yeah. So, like, a couple closing points is if you're particularly on a Western hunt, don't forget to do the practice, the perfect practice that's uphill or downhill. Or shoot out of your tree stand if you're an Eastern hunter. Like, how many arrows are you going to shoot in your backyard and be an all-star? Get up in the tree.
Have to.
It changes
100%.
some stuff.
100%.
So do the perfect practice. Yeah, you have to know those angles, and you have to have a good rangefinder to know those angles.
Yep.
There's no other way around it.
100%.
Shoot forgiving setups, whatever that means. Like,
Yeah.
Stuff happens when you party with animals, and you're more likely to have a time or speed problem than I whacked him in the knuckle.
I agree.
Which is, the knuckle's a small part of them. It's possible you hit the knuckle.
Yeah.
But it's much more likely a deer dips.
Yep.
It's much more likely maybe you have to shoot at an animal without ranging it. How often does that happen?
For sure. Well, and also don't forget, if you slow your bow down by shooting a heavier arrow, your arrow's on the string for a longer period of time when you fire. So when you make mistakes, when you torque irregardless or imperfectly, which you're going to be in an odd, awkward position, right? So you're you're putting some adverse pressure on there. If your arrow is slower, it's going to react worse because it has more time on the string while it's torqued. The faster it is, the quicker it comes off, the less chance it has to make as much of an error.
Yeah, I don't really even have any devil's advocate with you anymore. I would like to argue with you about stuff, but I don't really have an error argument to make that.
Well, the longer you're in it, the more you have the opportunity to see mistakes happen, and the more the things that I tend to point out start coming up a little higher in what you're looking at. So, I mean, I've been doing this for freaking almost 40 years.
Yeah, even around the block, dog.
Like, and I've been shooting 400 grain arrows since like the late 90s. Like, I've been shooting light for a long time, and I've only like maybe 2 times out of my entire hunting life can I blame my penetration issue on it not being heavy enough. And one of them, I hit an elk right in the knuckle, like right in the knuckle. And I was shooting an awesome penetrating broadhead, like super, super penetrating broadhead. And that thing went in that far. It is it. It stopped, snapped it off, and off he goes. And that was a 410 grain setup. It wasn't like a ridiculously light, like a 350, 360 kind of thing.
Well,
so
yeah, I like where my arrow setup is right now. I mean, if I did need to lighten it up, I could take a little bit of point weight off. I could go to, I mean, point weight, I could drop 25 grains or increase it. So I don't know that I need to necessarily consider changing arrows. I like where it's at, you know. It's good.
10% makes a big difference when you start looking at it. So if you go to like the next lighter,
So I'm 455.
yeah. So if you go to like the next lighter design of arrow and drop like 25 off and go down to like a 300 spine instead of a 250.
But even in a Rip TKO, we
No,
do
no,
that.
I'm talking. No, Rip TKO is the weird one. So it's not a fair one to compare.
Right.
Because they all weigh the same.
Yeah.
There's like almost no difference between a 250, a 300, and a 350. They all weigh almost exactly the same. But if you go to like an XV or something else, then when you get into a slightly lighter spine arrow, you actually do lose some weight off of the arrow. And your 250 is kind of overkill for your poundage. You don't need to shoot a 250.
Yeah, I feel that too.
But it doesn't really hurt anything to do it in that scenario because you're not gaining arrow weight. But if you go to like an XV, for example, just to throw one out there that's light, and in a 300 spine, so it's still adequately spined, and drop 25 off the tip weight to ensure that you're still adequately spined, do you lose 50 grains off that arrow like that?
Well, I could
And
go
50 grains is more than 10%, and that's a pretty significant difference.
I could go 30 grain titanium instead of 50. Are those live now?
Yeah, they're live. They're on the website. We've burned through the first 500 already. I got another 1,000.
Okay, so there's going to be a lot of people shopping right now to get last minute gear. Josh is your gear dealer. He's
well, I'd like to be if I'm not.
He's our local.
It is a business model that we're trying to make work well.
He's our local dealer. If you need a fix, he's your guy for archery stuff and a lot more than archery now.
Them dime bags.
Yeah, he's got them bags. I have a discount code so you guys can get 10% off your order. It's just Tim C. And you want to get your grubby little mitts on some hunting gear. That's the time. That's the time of year. A lot of guys are going to be gearing up for the next 60 days.
Yeah, we've been diligent on keeping inventory and keeping stock, and I'm on the phone with manufacturers every day. And I'm a pretty good planner when it comes to those things. So we really don't run out of stuff very often unless there's just none, period.
Yeah.
So we got you covered.
Josh has new 30 grain titanium points, which is cool because it gets you less point weight, which gives you more broadhead flexibility or less arrow weight. So that would drop me 20 grains. And then if I wanted to go to 100 grain broadhead, that's another 25 grains. And I could be 45 grains lighter if I wanted to be.
Yeah. And
So-
just not even change the arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, just that much.
Pretty cool.
Good options.
I think that's a wrap, guys. That's pretty cool. You know, I think I want to do as many of these fall hunting stories as we can. So we got local friends, people that we can bring in that get to share their stories. I think give them the platform, and
I'm sure there'll be a decent amount of them to do.
yeah,
For
talk
sure.
about hunting. And I don't know, man. To me, that's a cool part of hunting that I think goes unappreciated. Is like
Yeah.
the whole story side of it, right? Like
I agree.
you get to be a part of it all the time because people come into the archery shop, but
Yeah, from September till December, it's like every conversation in the store is somebody's hunting story,
yeah,
which is a good time. After
Yeah.
a while, they kind of blur together. You hear so many of them.
it does.
I guess I kind of take it for granted because it's been my whole life. I've heard so many hunting stories. It's just ridiculous.
The hunting stories are cool. Let us know what
They're
you think
great.
of them. I think I'd like to have a good mix from this fall, and wherever you guys are at, hunt hard. Have your gear as ready as it can be, because stuff happens when you party in the woods. Huh?
Well, I like to party, so I like my Jesus to party.
Yeah, exactly. And Josh has a couple hunts coming up. He got some archery.
Oh,
tags.
I got a pile. We'll see what happens. There'll be a whole bunch of hunting to do.
Cool. That's the pod.
Peace out.